Hi, this is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to the Construction Leaders Podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping construction company owners and executives build great people, projects, and profits by increasing their leadership effectiveness. Welcome to the Construction Leaders Podcast. My name is Eric Anderton. In this episode, we are going to be talking with Peter Worhunsky. He is the Vice President of Disney Construction, and today we're going to be smashing some fallacies about millennials in construction, diving into an example of one young female project engineer who took over a technical project with a challenging owner and excelled, and we're going to be breaking down a unique, customized process for talent development, including a surprising approach to mentorship. So today's show is brought to you by the Construction Leaders Dashboard. Go to my website, ericanderton.com/CLD, and download your copy of the Construction Leaders Dashboard. I appreciate you listening. I know you're going to enjoy this show. It's my pleasure to welcome Peter Worhunsky, Vice President of Disney Construction out of the Bay Area. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here. It's an honor. I really appreciate what you're doing with the industry and developing the next generation of leaders.
Awesome. And that's exactly what we want to talk about here today. You have a specific perspective on millennials in construction, and I'd like you just to speak to that here for a few minutes.
Sure. We're a young, growing company. We are in the heavy civil construction space throughout California, highway, bridges, water, wastewater, and underground projects. And our company is young and growing, and we have a lot of millennials in some pretty senior positions in our organization, and we're always attracting and growing more of them.
That's excellent. So how would you describe the millennials' willingness to get stuck into the tough world of construction and succeed in that business?
I haven't seen any difference between millennials and any other generation in terms of good people who want to take on the challenges of this business and do really well. I think there's a fallacy in this industry and probably in the greater economy in general that millennials can't do the hard jobs and don't want to take responsibilities for things. And in fact, we've seen quite the opposite.
Well, why do you think that fallacy exists?
We have example after example at our company of millennials that have done really, really well at a young age, that are still with us, it's clear that they're going to be the future of this business and the future of the industry.
That's excellent. So I know we were talking offline just before, and we were talking specifically about one experience that you guys had about 3 years ago with a particular project where a millennial really succeeded on that project. And can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we were building a very technical bridge project. We were self-performing the majority of the work on it. It was about a $15 million contract. It was for a very difficult owner. Our project manager was he was a Gen X engineer who was already accomplished in his career, and left our company after he started having a family. He and his wife both worked, and he was able to work from home as a consulting engineer, so he left our company to do that and to start raising his family. And on the project, we had a young millennial at the time who was the project engineer who had been with the job since the beginning. And she, even though she was young, even though she was an engineer, she showed an incredible ability to understand the work technically, and also connect with the people that were building the job, our crews. And we saw that, and we decided to take the risk and to make the investment and make this person the project manager, and she did an incredible job.
So what gave you confidence to, instead of going out and bringing in someone who's old school and more experienced, what gave you confidence to bump her from that project engineer spot up to the project manager on such a challenging project?
We saw that she understood what drives this business. She understood the work, and she understood the people that build the work. And in addition to that, she had a very keen ability to accurately understand herself and her own strengths and weaknesses. So we knew that when we made that decision that we were going to be able to quickly develop this person, that she was probably, compared to a lot of other managers, she already exceeded their abilities. And so it would be an easy transition, and it would be a very quick ramp up, and it sure was.
It's interesting because I know in working with construction pros who are, either baby boomers or Gen Xers, one of the complaints about millennials is that they're a little cocky, and they seem to be unwilling to sometimes go to other people for feedback and for help. How did you find this particular project manager in terms of the way that she interacted with you and with the client? There
was none of that. She knew where she needed help, and I got to tell you, all of the millennials that we have that ability. And I think this is another millennial fallacy that they don't understand themselves, that they're cocky. I don't see this as any different than any other generation. I remember when I was really young in this business, I was definitely cocky.
Right.
And most of the people I knew, you have to be a little bit cocky to be in construction. And I don't see any difference in millennials that I do in a Gen X or the baby boomers or anybody else.
That's excellent. So, as she got into the project, and like you said, there was a challenging owner, a technical project that you self-performed. Being a woman, how did she work with the guys out in the field? How did she relate to them? What did she do to earn their respect, to be able to communicate with them well?
What she did more than anything to really earn respect and communicate was she was out there with them. So when they were having problems getting this work in place, when they were having issues with the owner and the inspectors or whoever it may be, she was there. She wasn't in her office behind a computer. She was out there on the grade in the mud with them, talking about it, owning the problems just like it was her own. And that very quickly built up a rapport and built up the respect of the crews. And I think the issue of whether she was man, woman, or whatever, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. She was highly competent and she cared about her people.
That's excellent. So that combination of competency, caring, and actually getting out there and communicating with people in the mud was what really helped her to gain that confidence and the respect of the people that she was working with.
Absolutely. We sometimes forget, especially now everybody's talking about the changes in construction technology and everything that's coming out with drones and BIM and all that other stuff. And I actually was speaking to a very seasoned superintendent yesterday who put it best. He said, computers never built anything. People built these projects.
That's right.
And that's never going to change.
That's right.
That's never going to change. And as long as you remember that and you keep that in mind, that it's people that are putting this work in place, it's not the computers, it's not the software, it's not the drones, that's when you're going to succeed.
You see, that's so critical. It's interesting. I was reading an article today, and it was addressing something separate, but it used this analogy of how we use vitamins as supplements in our nutrition, but we don't replace our diet with those vitamins. Yeah. And people think that this technology that's coming into the industry is somehow going to replace a face-to-face interaction or picking up the phone and actually calling someone. And it's so fascinating to see that people have their expectations for technology are too high because, like you said, a computer never built a construction project. Yeah, that's absolutely key there. So as this person was working on this project, what did you focus on as a leader to help her to succeed on a daily basis?
We developed a process with this manager that we still use today, and it's a formal process for development, but it's not formal in the sense that you see at larger companies where we put a bunch of people in a classroom around a scripted curriculum that everybody gets. We sat down with this person, we knew who she was, and we wanted to take a very targeted and strategic view of her development and grow her as an individual. So what I mean by that is we talked about where do you want to be out in the future? You're a senior person in the industry, where are you? And then what are your strengths and weaknesses right now? And she did an excellent job of being self-aware and understanding her strengths and weaknesses, which we find almost all of our people do. And then we came up with a plan to get her from where she was on that day to where she wants to go. And it was all self-directed. It's not the company telling the people, okay, this is how we're going to develop you. It's the reverse. Our people tell us where they want to go and where they're at. And then it's our job to get them there.
Okay, so this is interesting. Let's just dive into those three things. So you ask them where they want to go. You ask them to evaluate their strengths and weaknesses, and then you help them to put together a plan for going from where they are to where they want to be. What happens when, and if this doesn't happen, just let me know, but what happens when someone says, I want to go here, and yet you see in them a potential for perhaps something else? How do you handle that as a leader?
we try to guide them and sort of talk through it. And what we find more than that is we find that people don't have that picture yet.
Oh, interesting.
And so if we can't get that picture out of them, what we do is we say, you know what? We know you. We know where you are. We see this great potential in you. And how about this as your target?
That's interesting.
What do you think about that? And usually they'll say, it's something more than they ever thought they could get to, or I don't know if I could do all that. And they'll say, well, unless you tell me something different, this is what we're pointing at, and we're going to start getting you there today.
It's so interesting because sometimes young people, they can either be unaware or a little insecure. And sometimes even the very best people are the ones who are the most, unsure about themselves because they drive themselves and they tend to be critical of themselves. So it's interesting how you as a senior leader help to paint that picture for them and perhaps give them some ideas that they need that affirmation in a certain way.
They do, and they haven't. Most of them just haven't. I think they haven't thought of it, or they haven't put themselves in that position because they don't know what it takes to get there. And just by following this process with us, they can see it. They can start seeing that path develop. Like, I never thought I'd be able to run a very large project or manage dozens and dozens of people. But, well, look at this. Here's a clear path. Here's where I'm going to overcome some weaknesses. Here's where I'm going to grow. Here's where my leading edge is. And now I can start seeing that. I can see that develop.
That's interesting. So let's just talk a little bit about this idea of strengths and weaknesses. There's a lot of thinking behind that. Some people say just emphasize the strengths. Some people say work on your weaknesses. How do you guys approach the whole thing of identifying your strengths and weaknesses and working on those things?
So it's usually the self-assessment. And like I said before, most people we find have especially younger people, they have a pretty accurate self-assessment of where they are, their strengths and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. When we first started this, we were concerned. It's like, we're going to let these people pick it, but they don't really know themselves. That we can see this clearly. You can't clearly see yourself. We were totally wrong for the most part.
Interesting.
Our people were able to see their major gaps themselves. Like they knew it. They knew it intuitively, or they could see it.
Right.
And in terms of what do we do with the strengths and weaknesses, it all goes back to the goal. So we're pointing at the vision. We're trying to get the person from where they are today to where that vision is. And maybe sometimes that means working on a weakness. Maybe sometimes that means growing a strength. It all depends on what we're pointing at. And we have various combinations of working on strengths, working on weaknesses, combining the two, forgetting some of them, whatever it is to get to that goal.
So tell me, in your experience, what are some of the reoccurring weaknesses that come up that affect, building a project successfully?
Sure, especially for younger people that we have, especially ones that are very technically oriented that come out of an engineering type program. Most of them are very uncomfortable with what you typically see as the soft skills in dealing with people and also working on teams. So they are uncomfortable leading meetings. They're uncomfortable with public speaking. They're uncomfortable with people reporting to them. They're uncomfortable with all the things that you really need to get good at in order to be a manager. And that's something that comes up again and again. Another thing that we see.
So let me just ask
Sure.
that. How do you help them with that specifically? Because that is, if you're an engineer, you tend to be, sort of task oriented, very sort of objective, and like you said, not necessarily people oriented. How do you help them specifically with that particular challenge?
We will so let's say we're talking about, I'll take an example, public speaking.
Right.
So we have people, like right now we have some younger millennial leaders in the company that have to present to the company on a weekly basis. And when they started doing it, they were very uncomfortable with it. And they knew that was something they needed to grow into. So the way that we do it is very targeted. We pick one thing and we work on it, and they get direct feedback. So let's say they have to present at a company meeting. We're going to give them feedback within that same week. Hey, you did the meeting last week. This went really well in terms of what you presented. This didn't go so well. So next week, let's work on the things that didn't go well.
Right.
And then over time, by getting them, it's modeled on the idea of deliberate practice.
Okay.
So you're working alongside somebody who's giving you that immediate feedback, and you're growing just a little bit. And over time, that little bit really compounds and adds up. So what you think is these micro moves in a relatively short period of time produce a really big change.
So you're putting them in practical circumstances, in real circumstances where, for instance, they have to do that presentation, and then you're emphasizing slow incremental development that compounds over time.
Yeah, and working alongside a mentor who's been there. So
Okay.
It needs to be that somebody who's been there that can do it, that's there with them in the trenches, giving them that feedback.
So let's talk about the idea of a mentor. How do you go about? Do they select their mentor? How do you go about that mentor aspect?
When we figure out what it is that we're going to work on with them, what's the task, what's the skill, what's the weakness you're overcoming, we try to match people with that. So we've had superintendents working with our technology director because the superintendent really wanted to understand our software systems better.
Interesting.
We've had engineers working with foremen on things because the engineer wanted to understand something technically that we knew that foreman was really good at. We've had different people acting as mentors in different parts of the company. It doesn't matter where you are in terms of quote unquote seniority. It's about who has the skill that this person needs to learn.
So that's interesting. So what I heard there is that you have, and you don't typically hear this a lot, this idea of someone in the field mentoring someone in the office, and having people who may not necessarily cross paths all the time coming together for a specific learning point.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. So as this young woman, she was leading this $15 million project. What was the biggest challenge she faced on the project?
The biggest challenge was definitely on this project, the owner. I mean, the job was very technical, and again, we self-performed most of the work. But the building of the work for us, especially for her, she's so technically strong and technically oriented, that was kind of secondary. The biggest challenge we had was dealing with a really, really bad owner and lots of changes and doing the administration around that and making sure that we were going to be in a position to resolve all of this stuff. And it was difficult. And she was working with people on the owner's side that weren't always respectful, that weren't always playing what we saw as above board. Uh-huh. And it was a challenge. It's something that could really wear you out and grind you down unless you can find a way to get through it.
And what did you do as a leader to help her to stay positive and to stay on track and to keep focused on finishing the work?
So when I knew that environment was going to be challenging. And so part of what we do, or one thing that we often do is our development process is, if we have a book that we've read, right, that we like and say, this is a great book. We're going to read this together. I've read it. I want you to read this book. So one of the things I started with her was there was a relatively recent book at the time on Stoic philosophy. Uh-huh. And I thought it was great because it was teaching that mindset.
Which book is it?
This is Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah.
So,
awesome book.
It's an awesome book. Yep. And it was, for someone who was coming up as an engineer, they're not exposed to this stuff. I was a philosophy major, so it was cool. All over the place. So we went through that. And so the first thing it was to teach her, to give her that mindset that even if you're dealing with these hyper stressful situations and people that really should be behaving a lot better than they are and aren't necessarily providing you the level of respect you deserve, what happens to you and how you feel about it, most of the time, it's up to you.
Right.
And you need to remember that, and you need to work on that, and you need to develop that space that allows you to say, you know what, I can't control how this person's treating me, but I can control how I react to it.
There you go. That's interesting. So being able to bring to her a resource such as that book and to go through it with her helped specifically with the challenges that she was facing on that project. Yeah,
that was the first two parts of it. And the third part of it was just being there with her in the trenches going through that and being able to say to her, you did a great job in that meeting. They were being jerks, but you kept your composure. You got your point out. We got through it. And being able to provide that real-time feedback so she could see, hey, this went well, or hey, you know what, I still need to work on this part of it.
That's interesting. So despite all of the obstacles, give me an idea of how the conclusion of the project, how it all wrapped up, and what the sort of the bottom line for you guys was.
It ended up in litigation.
Uh-huh.
The conclusion's still unknown.
Interesting.
And but I can tell you it's going about as well as we could hope it could go. So maybe by the time this airs, there'll be a positive outcome that we can report.
That's excellent. But despite the challenges that are even still ongoing, how would you characterize her performance overall throughout that whole project?
It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. And we couldn't have asked for a better manager regardless of age or gender or whatever. She did an incredible job.
That's terrific. So in conclusion here, in light of this idea of your company's philosophy of self-development, give me 3 takeaways that a construction leader could really take and use when thinking about developing the younger folks in their organization.
The first thing is it needs to be self-directed. So it's not the company imposing the development on the people. It's the opposite. We see it as the opposite. The people are imposing the development on the company. They're saying, this is where I want to go in my career. This is where I think I am. Please help me get there. And then it's our job to get them there. It's not our job to say, these are the things we want to train you in. So it needs to be self-directed, and it also, as much as possible, it needs to be very much based around the individual. It's harder to do. It takes a lot more investment. It takes a lot more investment of the leadership to do it because you have to do it in a more customized and personal way. But the results are so much faster and so much larger if you can provide the development in that way.
Okay, so it has to be self-directed. And specifically earlier, you talked about those 3 things, that you sit down with them and you have them articulate their hopes and their dreams and their goals. And then you provide them some feedback and perhaps give them some perspectives that they didn't have in terms of their potential. And then you talk about their strengths and their weaknesses. And you begin to identify areas that they could perhaps develop themselves in. And then the third thing is that you put that plan in place. Is that right?
We put the plan in place, and then we match them with the people that are going to get them there.
There you go. Okay, so it's the hopes, the dreams and goals, the strengths and weaknesses, the plan in place, and then the mentoring aspect as well.
Yes.
Interesting.
And the mentors come from everywhere.
See, now that was another key right there. So you have folks, someone in the field can mentor someone in the office, and it isn't based on their seniority in the organization. It's based on how they can make a contribution to that person's development specifically.
Yes. And, we take this so seriously that we do, it's like most companies do, we have quarterly employee reviews. Right. And we go in and we give them the review.
Well, you'd be surprised. Most companies don't do quarterly employee reviews, but go ahead.
So that's only half our process. So where it's the company and the manager sort of assessing the employee and the goals that we have. As the other half of that is they assess us and their development.
Oh, interesting.
So we have their goals. We're tracking their goals. We're saying, how are these goals going?
Right.
Are the mentors doing what we needed them to do for you? Are you still doing the meetings? Have you gotten as far as you wanted to in the last 3 months? Like, what's happening with it? And how are we as the company meeting your development goals?
That's terrific. And so that's interesting because then you have to be willing for some feedback yourself as a leader.
We do, and that, and most people are uncomfortable, giving that, and it takes a little bit to get it out of them. But the ones that have been doing it for a while, it's so helpful because not only are you going to get feedback about their development, but it's going to make them more open to giving you feedback about your company. Yeah,
that's terrific, and you need that feedback because sometimes we miss so many things in our organization just because we only have one perspective ourselves.
Yeah, and we're not there. You're not especially. It doesn't take any significant amount of size in a construction business to where the senior managers are out of touch with what's really going on. Unless you're there at the workplace, you really don't know everything that's going on. So you got to get out and you got to speak with the people that are there building that work, and you need to get that feedback from them.
That's terrific. Well, Peter, I really appreciate your time today, and we got some great takeaways here in terms of identifying and then developing talent, particularly young people. I really appreciate your perspective, and thanks for joining us today on the Construction Leaders Podcast.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Eric.
Hey, this is Eric Anderton. Thank you for listening to the Construction Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a rating at iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. This episode has been brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. Kick-Ass Meetings is a simple but powerfully effective meeting structure that I've used with construction companies for the past 15 years. It shows them how to build an action plan to solve their toughest challenges in a meeting that lasts less than an hour. Go to my website and download your free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report at ericanderton.com ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. That's Eric Anderton, and Anderton is spelled ANDERTON.com/kickassmeetings. Thanks again for listening.